For over 10 years, suspicious fires burned homes and businesses in Southern California. Arson was suspected, but there was little physical evidence. On October 10, 1984, a cashier was working at Ol's Home Center. Around 7 p.m., the cashier heard an emergency public announcement over the address system. He went to go see what was going on and noticed a pillar of smoke. The cashier started to evacuate people to the nearest exit, and then the fire became a blazing inferno. The cashier barely got out alive. 4 others were not so lucky. A 2-year-old and his grandmother, along with 2 employees, died in the blaze. When the fire was extinguished, investigators started going through the rubble for clues. Investigators could not find the point of origin. The official explanation was that the fire was accidental. But John Orr, who was an arson investigator for the nearby Glendale Fire Department, disagreed. Arson investigator John Orr believed the fire took place in some patio cushions. 2 months later, after the fire at Ol's Home Center, there was another suspicious fire at another Ol's store. This time, there was no question that the fire was arson. The point of origin was in a foam padding section of the home products department store. 90 miles away, there was several other suspicious fires in Bakersfield, California. One of the fires was set in a craft store. Arson investigator Marvin Casey arrived at the scene shortly after it was extinguished. At this fire, investigators found evidence in a bin of dried-up flowers. Arson investigator Marvin Casey found a yellow sheet of paper that was used to conceal some type of incendiary device. It had 3 matches wrapped around a cigarette butt attached to a rubber band. The device burned slowly, allowing the arsonist to make a getaway. There was another fire that same day at a hardware store in an area that stored pillows. When arson investigator Marvin Casey reviewed the dates and times of these fires, he discovered that all the fires occurred on Highway 99 around the time a group of arson investigators met for an annual convention in Fresno, California. Marvin Casey believed that there was a possibility that the arsonist can be one of their own, setting fires. Casey then got a list of the 300 people who attended the conference and narrowed it down to 55 people, based on where they lived relative to the convention center. When Casey told his superiors that one of the 55 arson professionals was their serial arsonist, he was ignored. The incendiary device found at the craft store fire was sent to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for an analysis. Crazy enough, they found a partial print on the yellow sheet of paper. The fingerprint was entered into the automated fingerprint identification system, containing prints of convicted criminals. The print did not match any in the database of known criminal offenders. Marvin Casey then asked the ATF to compare the prints with the 55 people on his list that attended the arson convention near the fires, but the request was denied. 2 years later, there was another bunch of store fires, this time along cities near Highway 101. Casey then examined the dates and times of those fires and found out there was another nearby convention of arson investigators. On the list of that convention attendance were 10 names that also attended the earlier arson conference. Casey then convinced the ATF to take the 10 names and do an analysis on the fingerprints, but there was no match. Another 2 years passed, and then the arsonist struck again in Los Angeles, California, setting fires to dozens of stores in the area and causing millions of dollars in damages. Federal ATF agent Mike Matassa headed the investigation. Matassa heard about Marvin Casey's theory of it being an arson investigator, and he also learned about the fingerprint on the incendiary device. Agent Mike Matassa then asked LA County Sheriff's Office to analyze the fingerprint. They compared it to their database of anyone who applied there for a job, and they found a match. The fingerprint matched the left ring finger of John Leonard Orr, an arson investigator with the Glendale, California Fire Department. John Orr wanted to be a LA police officer. He applied for a job and passed every exam except the psychological test. John Orr then applied for the LA Fire Department but failed the physical part of the test. Eventually, he winded up getting a job at the Glendale Fire Department. He rose through the ranks and became an arson investigator, and eventually a captain. John Orr was one of the people on Casey's list who attended both arson conventions. The earlier fingerprint comparisons simply missed it. The fingerprint linked John Orr to only one of the fires. So rather than arrest him on one fire and have a minimal sentence associated with it, they wanted to investigate and try to tie him into all the fires. That had the same MO. They started surveillance on John Orr, placing a tracker on his car. On November 22, 1991, at 3:30 p.m., The tracker placed John Orr at the Warner Brothers studios in Burbank, California, where a fire broke out at a television set in the studio. John Orr then drove home, received the official dispatch from headquarters. The dispatcher, without knowledge, gave the wrong address for the fire. John Orr winded up going to the right location and not the address the dispatcher reported. Even though they couldn't directly tie him to the fire in the television studio, they couldn't allow him to be on the street any longer, so with a warrant, they searched John Orr's home. They found in his briefcase some cigarettes, matches, rubber bands, and yellow-lined paper. John Orr denied that there was anything wrong with those materials and denied that it was his fingerprint found on the incendiary device at one of the fires. Investigators found a home videotape in John Orr's house. In the video was a close-up of a home in California, and then there was footage of the house 18 months later, with that same house on fire. John Orr was taking before and after videos. Even before fire departments arrived, he already was filming. Also found in John Orr's house was a manuscript for a book he had written. It was about an arson investigator turned arsonist. The similarities of the book and the real crimes were too coincidental. He would set a fire in one place, then drive to another place, just so he could watch the fire burn. In the book, John Orr talks about a 2-year-old dying named Matthew, which was the same name of the 2-year-old who died in the first fire at Oll's hardware store. John Leonard Orr was convicted of multiple counts of arson and murder. He was found guilty of setting numerous fires, several of which resulted in fatalities. Orr, a former fire captain with the Glendale Fire Department in California, was implicated in a string of arson fires that occurred over a period of several years. In particular, Orr was convicted of setting the fire at the Oll's Home Center in South Pasadena, California, in 1984, which resulted in the deaths of 4 people. He was also convicted of other arson fires in the Los Angeles area. Orr's conviction was the result of an extensive investigation by law enforcement agencies. His trial brought significant attention to the issue of arson and the challenges in identifying and apprehending arsonists. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his crimes.
Jury in the above entitled case finds the defendant John Leonard Orr guilty of the crime of first-degree murder in violation.
John Orr is believed to have set nearly 2,000 fires in a 30-year arson spree, most of them between 1984 and 1991, making him the most prolific serial arsonist in American history.